In this video, I'll demonstrate how to use BloodHound to perform Active Directory attacks. BloodHound is a single-page JavaScript web application used to identify internal network vulnerabilities in Active Directory, such as misconfigurations or weaknesses due to privilege escalations through lateral movement. BloodHound has data collection tools, one called SharpHound and another one BloodHound.py, and possibly some others. An analysis for data collected for BloodHound is done through a graph-based interface with nodes between connected entities in order to discover attack paths. BloodHound isn't the tool to carry out the attacks. The attacks will be carried out by other tools, with basic PowerShell commands in some cases, or post-exploit tools like Evil. BloodHound Community Edition is what I'll use for this video, and the quickest way to get up and running with it is through its Docker image. This isn't a video about Docker, so I'll skip the Docker install. You can verify Docker is installed and ready to go on your system by running sudo docker run hello-world. You should get hello from Docker. This message shows that your installation appears to be working correctly. If you don't get this message, go to the Docker website, follow the instructions, get it installed, and get back to this point. And now we can get the Docker image. So I'll use curl -L https://ghst.ly/get bhce, and this will get the Docker compose file. So we want to use a greater than symbol and put this into docker-compose.yml. And we'll type cat docker-compose.yml, and that looks like a typical Docker file. So now we can run Docker to pull this image. So sudo docker compose pull. It may take a few minutes depending on your connection speed to get all the files it needs. And then once it completes, you can type sudo docker compose up. Now it's important here to follow what's going on in the output, because the first time you run Docker, it's going to generate an initial password, and you want to grab that initial password from this output. So on my screen, I have one of the log messages that say initial password set to, and I want to make sure I stay on that part of the screen and grab the message. I'm going to copy this. And now the log continues going, but I want to switch over to my browser, open up a new browser tab, and type localhost:8080. Now, where it says email address, we're just going to type admin. The default user is admin. Paste the password in from the log messages, login, and we're going to need to paste it again. So it's just a one-time password. So we paste it in because it expires. Now I'll grab my actual password from off screen and paste that in. I click reset password, and then it should take me into BloodHound. Now, initially it tells me there's no data available. I can use the data collection tools like SharpHound or AzureHound or BloodHound.py. And then afterwards, once I've collected the data, we go to File Ingest, and we upload the files we like to use. If you don't have data you can use, or you don't have AD running on your local network, or it's not managed by AD, you're not going to get a whole lot of information out of it. So what I recommend is going to the GitHub page from Spectre Ops, the makers of BloodHound, and go to their example data. And then there's the AD example data and the Azure example data. So I've downloaded these, and I'm going to load the AD example data.zip. And then I'll take the AD example data.zip and drag it onto the screen and hit upload. Now, it may take a few minutes to ingest, but the file ingest page has a status, so it says it's ingesting. And when it completes, it'll update the status message, and then we'll be ready to explore the data. Now, I've waited a few moments. I'll refresh the page just to see the status. And at the moment, it tells me it's analyzing. And then it gives us a message complete, so we're ready to go. We'll switch over to Explore, and we can search for something. Let's search for a name. I'll search for Alice. So we have Alice at phantom.corp, and there's a single node. So if we select the node, it gives us information about that object, about what it is, and we can scroll down until we get to this section here where we have sessions. the membership or group membership, outbound object control, and inbound object control. So Alice is connected to many other nodes on the network. The outbound object control shows there's been some big improvements in BloodHound over the past few years to display some pretty big and complex information. So I'm going to switch over to a simpler user. I'm going to look for Bob at phantom.corp. I'll select Bob, and then his local graph is much smaller. So we have Bob here on the network, and each one of these edges between the nodes, you can actually select. You can select what they own, right owner, generic writer. And when you select one of the edges, one of the labels on the edges, it'll give us some information. Let me scroll over and find something with a bit of information. So you can see as I click the different edges, the labels on the edges, it changes the information in the right-hand panel. So it shows some general information about what the edge means, Windows abuse, what you might be able to do with it, some suggestions if you're using Linux abuse, OPSEC, and references. So some information about where this information comes from. So this comes in handy when you're trying to test it. When you're looking for vulnerabilities, you're looking for hops that don't make sense. So you can see the ownership of a particular user, what they're a member of, and how they're connected to other users and other entities. And quite often, if something's misconfigured, you'll find a path to a user or a group with elevated privileges. And sometimes it's hard just to do it visually. Now we can expedite this by using pathfinding, and we can look for how Bob is connected to domain admins. So we can look at domain admin at phantom.corp. So that's a possibility. So we look how Bob is a member of domain users, and domain users have access to phantom.corp. And then there's some connections between phantom.corp and other logons and what they contain. So the interesting thing is that you can go from Bob to domain user to Phantom Corp, which contains managed service accounts, which contains Hayden at phantom.corp, who is a member of domain admins. Permission on the parent. So if we go to select one of the edges and go to the abuse section, permission on the parent of a child object may enable compromise of the child object through inherited ACEs or linked GPOs. See the inbound edges on the parent object for details. We have domain phantom.corp contains the container managed service accounts at phantom.corp. So there's a path here to domain admins at phantom.corp, which may or may not be expected. But you can see we get a visual sense of how we can go from Bob all the way across to domain admins. If we're not sure there's a connection, we could always go into pathfinding and see if BloodHound can work it out for us. And sometimes it says path not found. So I can't go from one group, this denied RODC password replication group, to domain admins. And that might be what we want to see. And if there is a connection, there could be a configuration problem. It's something that leads to an exploit that allows for lateral movement through the network and the escalation of privileges. And that concludes this demonstration of performing Active Directory analysis using BloodHound.